And welcome to the I-24 News Desk. I'm Batya Leventhal, coming to you live from our studios in Tel Aviv with our top story making news this hour. We have breaking news and a developing story here in Israel, where there's been a terror attack in Ma'ale Adumim, an Israeli town in the West Bank. 4 people have been injured so far. 1 was seriously wounded and 3 others were moderately wounded. The attack took place near a shopping mall. The suspected terrorist was shot by an off-duty border police officer, with footage from the scene showing the suspect laying unresponsive on the ground. The terrorist reportedly used a handgun in the attack and was carrying a backpack containing extra ammunition. A spokesman for the Hamas terror group has already responded to the attack, stating, quote, "The strikes of the revolutionaries and resistance fighters will not stop in defense of our land and sanctities and to thwart the settler government's plan to build the alleged temple on the ruins of the Al-Aqsa Mosque." The shooting is the first attack reported since a stabbing attack in which a man was seriously wounded in the Gilo neighborhood of Jerusalem a little over a week ago. Additionally, it also comes following a shooting attack in which 3 Israelis were wounded near the Tekoa Junction in the southern West Bank about 2 weeks ago. Let's cross now live to Dean Elsdan, the international spokesperson for the Israeli police, who is live on the scene. Dean, thank you so much for being able to be with us here on the I-24 News Desk. What more do we know? We know that 4 Israelis are currently wounded. You're at the scene. What can you tell us about the settings there and also any news about the attacker?
So I can't give too much about the attacker, but I'll give you some background. Right now I'm at the scene, which is a very disturbing sight. A terror attack took place where a terrorist opened fire on civilians. Now, anytime you're talking about attack on civilians, it's heartbreaking. We have, according to medical officials, 5 individuals who were injured in this shooting attack. The terrorist has been neutralized. He was neutralized by an off-duty border police officer who heard the commotion. He understood what was happening, ran outside, found what was happening, where the terrorist was. He called for the terrorist to put down his weapon, and when the terrorist turned around, he began opening fire on the officer. The officer engaged the terrorist. He managed to neutralize him, and large police forces have arrived to the scene. We've taken complete control over the perimeter. We've secured the area. And at this time, we have, like I said, a large police force, which includes the police commissioner himself, as well as the border police commander. We're ongoing with this investigation, getting more evidence, more information. So when it comes in, we'll be able to give you guys more information.
And Dean, we're seeing now that the trauma unit at Sharet Tzedek says that 2 are seriously injured from the shooting. Can you explain to our viewers a little bit the difference between someone that is moderately, seriously and lightly injured in a terror attack like this? What exactly does it mean in terms of the extent of their injuries?
Well, that talks directly towards the life-threatening condition that they're in. You know, it can also be very dynamic. We can send somebody to the hospital who's in moderate condition, and then in a moment of seconds, it turns into a very difficult situation where they're fighting for their life. Now, anybody who's affected by terror, it's obviously very sad and very heartbreaking. So our thoughts and our prayers are with them and their families. Nobody should have to go through this type of terror. We don't see this happening in New York, anywhere in Paris, across Europe, or any other country that needs to fight to defend themselves against terrorists who go out and attack civilians on the street, right outside of a civilian mall in a residential neighborhood, right outside of Jerusalem.
Dean, thank you so very much for those updates. We really appreciate it. I believe that the Israel Police Chief Kobi Shabtai and the National Security Minister are on the way. And joining us now as well, who is also on the way to the scene, is our senior correspondent, Owen Alterman, who joins us now via the phone. Owen, as we just mentioned, Israeli Police Chief Kobi Shabtai and the National Security Minister Itamar Ben-Gvir are said to be on the scene already. Where is the Prime Minister? Has he been briefed on what's going on at the moment in Ma'ale Adumim?
Yeah, Batya, as soon as the news came through, Prime Minister Netanyahu was notified by chance. He was actually at Central Command, the command unit for the Israeli military that covers the West Bank and would cover Ma'ale Adumim, with none other than the IDF Chief of Staff, Herzi Halevi, and with Defense Minister Yoav Gallant. So they were in the room together, and Netanyahu getting a briefing from the two at the time the news broke, and they were informed during their discussions, and the statement then put out shortly afterwards from the Prime Minister's office. Other than Netanyahu getting regular updates, no other word from the Prime Minister's office. But obviously, Batya, it's a developing story. We're still getting other information about this. Fortunately, from the perspective of the victims, the terrorist was neutralized, so it's not an ongoing event. But still, with the news coming in, I suspect we'll hear from the Prime Minister, but maybe not just at this point. The question, of course, is will we hear from National Security Minister Itamar Ben-Gvir once he gets to the scene? I should say there are at least some videos circulating that show him already there. But at any rate, Ben-Gvir has been known to sometimes make statements after the attacks. We'll have to wait and see if he decides to do it this time.
And we are seeing slight scenes there, live footage that we can see Ben-Gvir sort of in the crowd there at the scene. And Owen, unfortunately, we've had enough being able to speak about this in the studio with recent attacks, specifically in the West Bank. In your opinion or your analysis, do you believe that this could be linked to the more hardline government, or do you think it's in retaliation for the security situation at the moment in the West Bank, given that there's nightly raids there by the IDF in order to root out terror?
Well, obviously, we don't, Batya, at the micro level know enough. By the way, one very important detail from Israelis' perspective. It's been confirmed by the mayor of Ma'ale Adumim, Benny Kasriel, talking to Israel's Channel 14 News, that the terrorist had a work permit and was working at a community center as a maintenance worker at a community center in Ma'ale Adumim. So coming into Ma'ale Adumim every day for work, a Palestinian in the West Bank. But, you know, that's very common. Many West Bank Palestinians work in Israeli settlements in the West Bank in many jobs, most, of course, just making a living for their family and just being there to provide and put food on the table. Of course, it's an ongoing concern for those who live in the communities that, of course, there could be a worker like this who turns out to have done deeds such as this. He had an M16 rifle that he used to conduct the attack, and the authorities still trying to figure out how he got that weapon. You know, there are a lot of weapons afloat, unfortunately, so not very hard for people to get their hands on them. He also, as we may be able to see in videos, was wearing a yellow vest to try and, in a sense, disguise himself, maybe make himself look like some kind of security officer. But obviously, that's going to be something that authorities are going to want to investigate. Again, it's important for the Palestinian economy and for Israel's relations with the Palestinians that there be Palestinians who can work in West Bank settlements as a part of keeping the Palestinian economy on its feet. So I don't know that we could expect anything across the board to be done against those workers, but one question that I think will arise from this is, will there be harsher procedures in terms of investigating background? Obviously, that's going to be something we'll know more about, certainly as we learn more about the profile of the attacker. As we heard, the police spokespersons are not yet ready to go into that.
I-24 News senior correspondent Owen Altman, thank you so much for joining me via the phone while you are making your way currently to the scene there in the West Bank. And joining me here in studio is Rafael Yerushalmi, the former senior intelligence officer for the IDF and a security analyst. Thank you so much for taking the time to be here this afternoon. We were just getting updates that there are now reportedly 6 injured, 3 at 2 separate hospitals each. We know that a border policeman ended up shooting the terrorist. What does that speak to in terms of the attacks that have happened, at least in recent weeks, have mostly been done by off-duty police officers or citizens that happen to have gun licenses, this time around being done by a border cop?
Yes, well, it probably justifies the intention of the government to widen the permits for carrying weapons to more and more Israeli citizens, mostly those citizens who have a background of having served in the military or retired policemen and people who can be trusted with a weapon in their hands. It seems to be quite justified. There was also a call recently from the authorities saying whoever already has a permit should carry his weapon around. And not only in the territories, but even in the streets of Tel Aviv, because many a time, lives are saved. Like in this case, you're talking an M16 as the weapon of the terrorist, meaning a semi-automatic weapon that could have killed 20 people, not injured 6. Right. So this was stopped in time. Fortunately, I think this Palestinian was not very well trained in using an M16, because in a crowded street it could have been much worse. He knew exactly where he was. He knew the area. I have to mention that he didn't cross the green line. He's inside the Palestinian Authority territory, so-called territory. So it's not like he had a permit to go into Israel, but he was working in a place in Ma'ale Adumim. The latest incidents in Ma'ale Adumim have that in common, that those who perpetrated them were working there, either on a building site or some municipal place. It's people who are working there and who knew the place, and usually if you will ask tomorrow morning, I'm sure his Jewish Israeli colleagues will be completely baffled by the fact that this guy committed a terrorist act. They will, I'm sure, they will be surprised. Why was such a nice guy? So this is the problem. This shows how powerful the propaganda on the social networks of the Hamas and the Islamic Jihad, how powerful and efficient it is, because it's not just incitement to hatred and calling to be a martyr and defend the cause. It gives you all the practical advice what to do. The fact that he was wearing this like yellow jacket to look like a municipal worker or a security person, this is something that you will find on the internet, explained to you black on white by the Hamas. Disguise, you have to disguise. You can disguise as a Jew, with an Orthodox Jew with a big hat and a black coat. You can disguise as a security worker. So all this is this incitement, and also the logistics. This M16 rifle, the Hamas will tell you where to get it. There is a mafia in the black market of the mafia in the Palestinian territories. Now we'll sell you weapons. It's not such a so difficult. So the only thing I'd like to point out is the presence of Mr. Ben-Gvir at the place of incident. Mr. Ben-Gvir has absolutely no jurisdiction there where he is. He's in the territories. His jurisdiction is the police and the internal security of Israel. Where he is now in Ma'ale Adumim is under the entire responsibility of the army and the military governor. This is just another provocation. And one of the, so of course it doesn't justify in any way terrorist activities, but it's certainly unneeded and unnecessary. And the other irony is that right now, I mean, as the incident was taking place, the chief of state, Mr. Benjamin Netanyahu, was sitting with the chief of the Central Command to evaluate the situation in the territories. And just as they're sitting, here is what's happening. And maybe this time, the political level, whether it's Mr. Ben-Gvir, whether it's Mr. Benjamin Netanyahu, maybe this time they will give an attentive ear to what the generals have to say, to what the security services have to say. We need a much, much tougher stance, hand in the territories. And when I say tougher hand, it has nothing to do with the Palestinian population, no collective measure, nothing. It has to do with the leaders. We have to start hitting and targeting the leaders.
And obviously this also coming on the exact same day that here in Israel we're commemorating the 9-year anniversary of Hadar Golden, the slain soldier during Operation Protective Edge, being killed and obviously kidnapped by Hamas. Rafael Yerushalmi, I want to thank you so much for being here in studio. And I'd like to just recap our breaking news and developing story here in Israel. A terror attack in Ma'ale Adumim, an Israeli town in the West Bank. There are conflicting updates whether 5 or 6 people thus far have been injured, but we do know that one was seriously wounded and others potentially moderately wounded. The attack took place near a shopping mall where the suspected terrorist was shot by an off-duty police officer.